another edition of Ask Michael Ehline. This is where I teach people the law in an unorthodox manner by using examples that we see in the news, case law briefs, but it's all about exposing the Leviathan and its instrumentalities and taking back your rights. Know the law and mean to keep it well. Come here to learn from an expert to know your right. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. All right. So I'm here today with John Filax, and we're, again, sorry about that, guys. We just had a little snafu with the last one we did, but that is I deleted that one, so we're good. And it looks like we're still live on YouTube, so probably the thought police didn't catch it in time. Completely cleared it from the internet. But yeah, I was just telling you, I got my A.R. and my Mini 14 over there, and you can't see the G19 because it's obscured. And so here's a little trick for you guys. Whenever you do a live, if there's anything involving a firearm, you can't touch it. As soon as it touches your body or you pick it up, you'll get a strike, and they may even take your channel down. So it's a real big problem with YouTube, man. They don't mess around because, again, they're, commie pinkos, and they don't like that kind of stuff. So now we know. So John, we're just waiting for the chat to fill up. Looks like we got 5 people watching, probably. There we go. Hey, Kevin Biernarski, good seeing you, bro. Hey, make sure to tell your friends, Kevin, that we're here. Send them the link or whatever. This is going to be a good show tonight. I have the honor of having my honored guest, John Filax, on the show tonight. Let's see if we can get a better view here. That looks kind of cool. Let me see if I can do a better one. All right. So I used StreamYard tonight just so I could look cooler. I got the cool filter to make me look like I'm about 10 years younger. The Restream doesn't let me do that, John. But I like Restream because there's none of this black stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Rami helped me set it up. He's a legit dude.
What's Restream? A different platform or something?
Yeah, it's kind of like StreamYard, but it's got other capabilities that StreamYard doesn't have. But then again, StreamYard has some capabilities that it doesn't have. And so the reason we went live on StreamYard tonight primarily is because I know you were going to try to simulcast it over on your channel, so I wanted to make it compatible. But obviously that didn't work out. That's okay.
Next time, brother.
Yeah, it's all good, man. So it's really nice having you on my show. You are the GOAT. Everybody give me a bunch of ones for John, the GOAT. Hey, Jocelyn. Yeah, that's right. So,
the best
John,
way to make love to a goat?
Yeah, I don't know.
Up against the cliff because they don't want to fall off.
Oh, jeez, that's funny. Oh man, you're killing me right now, brother. Okay, so anyways, John, I know that you have guys, and I've seen it on other lawyer shows too, where somebody will pop in and say, "Oh, you're a member of the British government because you're a lawyer and you can't be trusted, and you're a traitor because you use the last name Esquire, and you're part of the British Accreditation Registry."
All the time in the comments.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of history, because a lot of people don't really understand this. Americans always considered themselves to be Englishmen first. Even when they separated from the king, they still considered themselves to be Englishmen. They considered the king to be a traitor. And we didn't have law schools up until, I believe, like the early or mid 1800s in this country, if I recall properly. And the way you became a lawyer back then was you would go through the Inns of Court system. You would study law under a judge or a lawyer through the Inns of Court. And so the people would sit out, the people studying law would sit outside what they call the bar, and they would eat their food, but they would eat with the lawyers. And then the people, the apprentices, very similar to becoming a mason, a stonemason, they would learn the art of practicing law by following the lawyer around, going to court, sweeping out the office at night, and then they would be housed in what's called an inn, or the Inns of Court. And that original Inns of Court system started when King Henry broke off from England. From the Catholic Church. And so prior to that, it was just the church that had courts, and then the king would have his own courts. So it was sort of a compromise, because the king believed that his power came from God, and that he was a sovereign. Well, our founding fathers believed in natural law. So they believe, yeah, they believed that we had the same rights, duties, and obligations as a king, that the king was no better than us. And they'd twice executed kings for violating certain agreements that the king made to protect the people. And so they basically allowed the king to stay in power. I believe that was King Charles the First. And then when his son regained power, he executed everybody who fought against him. There's a famous movie called War of the Roses, I believe, that sort of gets into that history. But yes, but I just want to kind of give you guys a little breakdown. So what happened is when we broke off as Englishmen from the Catholic Church and started the Anglican Church, the lawyers were no longer allowed to be in London. And outside the gates of London, you had the Knights Templar. And the Knights Templar provided protection and they helped the king on the Crusades. And so they had their own castle right outside the gates of London. And I'll get into that in a little bit.
The original Masons, though, right?
I don't think the Masons were housed in that castle.
But the Knights Templar became the Freemasons, no?
That is what a lot of people believe. Yes, and it seems to be the case. Nobody knows 100% certain, but they certainly follow a lot of the same traditions based upon historical artifacts and documents that I've seen and found. Yes, that would be true. Okay. Now, ultimately, the Knights Templar were kicked out, and they had, I believe they leased that castle from the king. And ultimately, they were kicked out, obviously, because the Knights Templar were Catholic. So they got taken out of England at some point. It may have been around the time they were killed off by the King of France. I don't have all that history in front of me right now. We could do another show about that in the future. But anyways, what ended up happening is there was no law for the commoners. And so that's where the term common law comes from. It just simply means law for the commoners. It was lawyers for the common man, the common people. It had nothing to do with the king anymore. The king still had his, I think it's called Rex Lex, had his own lawyers and his own judicial system. And then the commoners had their own courts, and then they still had the ecclesiastical courts as well. And ultimately, those were pretty much done away with. But for purposes of this show, we're talking about the origin of the B.A.R and where it comes from. And so we're going to get into that, John, to explain to these people because they're just a little bit confused. And I don't blame them, but it originally starts with the Freeman of Montana. These are the guys who started it all. And these are the guys that got me into law because I have a lot of sympathy. I had and still do have a lot of sympathy. And I'm one of these guys that they used to call sovereign citizens. I was one of these guys who would film cops with the big video cameras, and my friends and I would get the British West Indies plates, constantly argued to the police if they pulled us over that a license is not necessary because we're sovereign and we're free men upon the land and we don't need one, et cetera, et cetera. Well, obviously that didn't work out too well for me or my friends, as you probably.
Is this before you became a lawyer?
Yes, much before.
Okay.
Yes. This is what really led me on the road to becoming a lawyer. And so ultimately, an attorney, because you can be a lawyer without being an attorney, I'm sure.
Well, so let me ask,
yes.
I'm a durable power of attorney for my mother. Does that make me an attorney, so to speak?
Not really. And
Okay.
it doesn't give you the right to advocate for her unless it's under certain legislatively proscribed circumstances. So like if she's brain dead or whatever, you can make certain limited decisions on her behalf, but you can't argue on her behalf in court. Does this making sense so far?
Well, so I can buy and sell stuff in her name. I can do anything basically but represent her in court. Is that about right?
Well, anything that the power of attorney gives you, typically it's going to be a contractual type of a document, and it has terms and conditions that you can and can't do that are in that document, in that power of attorney. And then if it's not in the document, you would look in the statute to determine what your rights are, and as well as case law. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine earlier today. He doesn't think that we should have case law or stare decisis, but we could have a conversation about that another day too. Because I don't want to get too far off the beaten path, right?
What is stare decisis now? Explain that, please, real quick, if you can.
Absolutely. So stare decisis would just mean a decision that decides exactly what a statute or a common law methodology or a common law principle means.
So
Because
case law.
yeah, because sometimes there will be what's called a jurisdictional split. There might be a court in New York that says you can only have 10 rounds in your magazine, and there might be one in Montana that says absolutely not. The magazine is part of the weapon, and you can have as many rounds as you want. It's
Now
ridiculous.
let me ask this. So I kind of get the argument that you shouldn't have case law. The law should be the law. But the way I see it is the jury not only judges the facts of the case, but they also decide if the law itself is just, so to speak. So
That's a little bit.
that's why case law is binding, because the people, the jurors, the people of your peers get to decide. Even if the law says 10 rounds, this guy had 11 rounds, and the jury's like, BS. You're not going to convict him for that. So John Filax had 11 rounds. John Filax versus the state of Florida. 11 rounds is okay now, according to John Filax versus Florida. Yay, nay? The people
Well,
decide.
that's a little bit different, because if there's a Florida case that says that, then the court should not be allowing the case to go forward. What I think you're referencing more would be jury nullification,
Oh, yes.
Which John Jay and Thomas Jefferson said is absolutely lawful, and it is lawful still, according to the Supreme Court. The issue is the way that the courts get around it. These modern courts, these what I call Marxist courts, they say you can only decide the facts. Do you agree that you're only going to decide the facts? And if you
Well,
agree
how
to
can they do that, though?
because they get you to agree to it. And
Well,
if you say, go
I've
ahead.
seen a lot of cases where the judge will be like, I will instruct you, the jury, as to blah, blah, blah. So the way I got started in this whole thing was with the IRS, and the fact that there's no law that says you got to pay income tax. Americans living and working within the United States. So there's a case out of Illinois. It was called Whitey Harold, the Whitey Harold case. And the jury decided, no, he doesn't have to file a 1040. And the judge lost his damn mind, because they didn't, in the middle of the trial, Whitey Harold kept saying, show me the law that says I got to do it, and I'll gladly file the thing. I'll file the 1040. Well, the jury sent a note to the judge saying, Judge, please show us the law, since he's asking for it. We want to see it too. And the judge wrote back, you have all the information you need. So they said, well, you haven't provided the law. He doesn't have to file a 1040. And they said the judge lost his damn mind, turned red, and stormed off the bench. So,
well, that's a little bit different. Now, if you're citing an out-of-state case, unless it's a federal case that is basically approved by the Supreme Court, then that case wouldn't apply in Florida. I hope this is making sense.
you mean the Illinois case?
An Illinois case, because that would be what they call a jurisdictional split.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was a U.S. Supreme Court approved case, then it would apply in your court. But in your case, what it sounds like is the jury engaged in what's called jury nullification, which modern statutory courts hate. And what they do is they get you, when they swear you in, and at voir dire, when you're selecting the jury, they make you swear under penalty of perjury that you're only going to decide the facts. Well, that's not what the law is. You don't have to swear under penalty of perjury.
Then they won't select you then, right?
They won't select you. They'll kick you off the jury. Unfortunately, that's how it works. So if you believe in jury nullification, like I do, like our founding fathers did, then what's going to happen is, like, for example, I have articles on it all over the internet. So I have to tell the judge, I have to approach and say, Your Honor, there's no way that I can swear that oath, because I do believe in jury nullification, that I'm automatically kicked off the jury. They hate it. What they don't want is for you to say it in front of the other jurors, because it could bias the entire jury panel. Then they got to start over again with voir dire and select a new jury. Is this making sense?
There's a guy who used to stand in front of the courthouses and hand out jury nullification information. Like, I think it was called a well-informed jury nullification something. And they would come and harass the hell out of him. And he would just like lay down and plank on the sidewalk. And he forced them to literally pick them up and walk them away.
Carry him away.
Yeah.
Well, that's the deal is with that is it's absolutely true that you have a right to engage in jury nullification, which means you do have the right to decide the facts in the law. But the way they get around that and circumvent that in these modern courts is they get you to swear that you'll only decide the facts. And if you won't swear to that, they'll kick you off the jury, which I think is really unfair.
Can I tell you one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a YouTube channel, and a good friend of mine, his name's Constitutional Freedom Fighter, and he made T-shirts. And on the back is the Bill of Rights with a few added words. It's still the same thing. He just, he said Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, and he added like all firearms or something like that. And he wore that to jury duty, and they saw him, and they're like, "Oh, no!" They dismissed him before they even went in for questioning.
Yeah,
and he had to sign something that said, "You will make your decision according to the Constitution and the law." And he's literally wearing a shirt that says he'll do that, and that scared the hell out of him, and they dismissed him before he even got in the courtroom.
Yeah, that is a problem. So the deal is that the judges, the head judge, have the right to establish rules of decorum, and they feel that if you wear a shirt that has a political message, even though it's constitutional or whatever, even if you didn't add that language, it would probably be enough to show that some kind of a bias on your part.
A bias towards the Bill of Rights?
Yeah, well, whatever the judges want to think, and they'll kick you out. Now, some judges won't, but it's each court.
Bill of Rights.
It's each court that establishes that.
It's the Bill of Rights.
Look, you're arguing, you're preaching to the choir, man.
I know. It doesn't make sense. They should want everyone to wear that shirt and to abide by that's America. That's the core. That's everything. That's the end, the alpha, the omega, the end all be all, the everything. That's it right there. That's what court's supposed to be about. No.
Hey, no argument for me. But again, these modern judges, they're products of the public school system and the Marxist-run university system. So that is what we end up with. That's why I'm a proponent of homeschooling and teaching your children the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. That boys are boys and girls are girls, and just natural law, right? And that's why most leftists are atheists, because they hate the whole concept of the biblical principles that this country was based upon. So, but that's again another conversation for another day.
So, touching on that real quick, I know we're going off on sidebar, so to speak, but it's okay. Yeah. This is all interesting shit. So,
it's still bar though.
yeah. So, what were we just talking about?
Well, you were talking about jury nullification and stare decisis, and you touched on stare decisis is potentially having to do with jury nullification and whether or not the jury can decide the law. And we were getting into stare decisis and what that means.
Like, what were we literally just talking about 20 seconds ago? I just had a brain.
Just somebody wearing a Second Amendment shirt into court, and why would the judge kick them out for that?
It'll come back to me. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to derail your show here.
No problem. I'm just glad to have you. You're the GOAT, man. So so let's take a look here. Thank you, Mountain Mover, for showing up.
I'm not the GOAT, man, but that's a very nice compliment.
Well, you are. You're the original. And we got Chevy. So Chevy's one of the biggest supporters of my show. He always buys memberships for people. And
hi, Chevy. How are you, sir?
Gives me super chats and stuff. He's legit, man. Chevy, if you never checked out John Filax, go check out his channel. He's really good, man. He is the GOAT. Hey, Jody Shiloh, I'm glad you made it back in, man. And then Quana Parker, thank you again for joining me. I'm going to do a show with Mountain Mover probably like either midweek or next week as well. He's one of my guys.
So the main focus tonight was supposed to be people get in the comment section and are always saying a member of the bar is an officer of the court and you can't trust any lawyer because
or that he has a title of nobility, and that's okay. Well, first of all, it says no holder of a public office shall bear a title of nobility, and that's why judges
That's like
typically,
Article 1, Section 9 or something of the Constitution, right?
I think so.
And when Obama went over to the United Nations and held and hit the gavel, and he like took a title, and they were saying that it was illegal for him to do that or something to that
Well,
nature.
Obama was a disgrace anyways. So
Well, every president pretty much, honestly.
yeah, but he definitely put he started a race war in this country with the critical race theory thing that all white people are evil oppressors and stuff like that. So
And
yeah,
you didn't create your business, and then you didn't do that
yeah, you didn't
yourself.
build that. You didn't build that. Yeah, what a piece of shit. But anyways, so the deal is, here's the deal. Just because we were talking about stare decisis, so under English common law, which was basically how we established our court system, except where otherwise prohibited by our Bill of Rights and Constitution. So we borrowed the same judicial concepts from England into our country, including stare decisis and case law. And the reason why it was important is, again, because let's say one state like California says you can only have 10 rounds in your magazine, but another state says that you can have as many as you want. You can have a standard capacity magazine, right? If that happens, that's called what's a jurisdictional split. And so, what stare decisis is used for, just to answer your question really quickly, is to create comedy within the law. So, if there's a jurisdictional split like that, federally, it goes up to the Supreme Court, and typically they will decide, and then they will once and for all establish what it really means. Can you have 10 rounds or not? And I think Duncan versus Bonta is a case that's before the Supremes now that will ultimately decide that. But
That
obviously,
brings me to another question. Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. So how can any, basically, for the most part, restriction be legitimate as far as firearms go?
I don't think it can. But again, you've got judges who went to the Marxist run education system, public school system, and so they've been brainwashed into thinking that they can, and they do. Now, we got lucky with District of Columbia versus Heller, and my good friend Dick Heller, he was the plaintiff in that case.
Didn't you
Well,
represent him?
I did not represent him in that case, no, but I do
Oh,
represent
okay,
him
all right.
now in other matters. Well, he
Okay.
was introduced to me by Alan Beck, who's a good friend of mine. He's one of the one of the best Second Amendment rights lawyers in the country. He's excellent, and he's got some cases before Hawaii right now, and he's responsible for the switchblade knife cases. So if you want to look him up, Alan Beck, he's argued multiple cases before the Ninth Circuit. He's also an inactive Marine like me and a tanker. And you'll find that a lot with Marines. We're really big on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It's almost like part and parcel with being a jarhead. So just really quickly to get that out of the way, that's the purpose of case law and stare decisis, to once and for all decide with a court case like they did in ancient England what this particular law really means. Does that make sense?
So the jury creates case law by deciding in each district. One district could differ from another, and if it gets to a point, it goes federal, and then federal decides for all 50 states.
Correct. Whether it's a state law case or a federal court case, if there is a jurisdictional split between different states or different federal districts within states, what happens is you'll do a writ of cert, or you might have another way to go up besides a cert, depending on what type of case it is. Whether it's a murder case, could be a habeas, right? Could be someone who's falsely imprisoned, whatever it might be. If there's a jurisdictional split, it goes up. And so obviously people like me are like, well, wait a minute. If you're going to honor everybody's marriage contract in every state, it only makes sense that you honor the firearms right. So if I go across into Massachusetts from a free state into the communist-run Marxist Stalinist country of Massachusetts, I shouldn't have to risk being convicted of a felony for bringing my A.R. with standard capacity mags that has the nomenclature of an A.R. Because what they'll try to do is make you change the nomenclature, get rid of the pistol grip, get rid
There
of the
should be
bayonet lug.
reciprocity. Isn't that what they call that? Reciprocity?
Reciprocity, right. And so that's our battle right now, me and Alan, when we do these Second Amendment cases. We're trying to make that where there's comedy between all the states, just like there is with marriage laws.
Now, why
Hope
are you
that makes.
calling it comedy?
Well, just there's an agreement that it flows evenly between all the different states. There's no question that I can go into any other state with my concealed carry permit and carry my weapon concealed, for example.
Why the word comedy specifically? Because it sounds like you're like comedy. When I hear comedy, I think it's me. I'm funny. I'm a comedian. I'm ha
No,
ha ha.
no, comity.
Oh, comedy
Comity, yeah.
with a G.
No, comity.
Oh, comedy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
I'm
or just an equal application of the law across all the states when it comes
okay.
to
Okay.
a federally recognized right. But all
Got it.
these different states have different interpretations of how they can do things, and then the states will argue under the 10th Amendment they can make their own laws. But under the 14th Amendment due process clause, the Second Amendment, in my opinion, is no more or no less important than the other rights that are definitely recognized by the Supreme Court. The problem is the Supreme Court has never specifically said that the Second Amendment is a fundamental unalienable right like they have with the First and the Third, for example.
How? Why? How?
They've never said it. So since they haven't said it, they've never verbalized it or put it in an opinion. They've only put in DC versus Heller that we have the right, but they haven't said that it's a
And
fundamental right.
but then they put restrictions on that too.
I know, but I don't want to get too far off the beaten path, okay? But
Can I? All
I'm
right.
just
I know. I'm sorry,
so
man,
so
because you're a wealth of knowledge and I have questions. So the
yeah,
Supreme
no,
Court.
but we could do shows on this. I mean, that's
All
the
right.
whole point. Now I
Quickly
know that
though,
our next
educate
show
me
should
real
be.
quick.
Go ahead.
Those people are they the end all B.R? Are they the final say, or is it the people ultimately? Because people act like the Supreme Court, that's it. And I don't like that idea because, first of all, they're not elected. Secondly, there's no effing term limits for them. And you got people like Ginsburg and them, and
Oh God, tell me
right,
about it.
who back in her day said that, you know, smortion, I don't want to say because I don't know if that's lawful to say on YouTube, the ending pregnancy. She literally said that the reason they started doing that is to get rid of people they don't like certain gene pools. So now this lady who has this idea in her head that certain races should be
Oh, given an advantage over another based upon this.
no, she's on record saying that ending a pregnancy, I don't know if I could say the A word on here. The reason it was started was to get rid of the people that the undesirables of society.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay, that was the woman who was Hillary Clinton's hero, who helped start Planned.
A lot of people loved her. So
Who
now
helped?
we
Yeah,
got this person who thinks that there's certain people who are undesirable in the country when
yeah,
she should be an objective judge. She's unelected, she's appointed, and she gets to be a judge until she dies. I think
yeah.
something like that should disqualify you, or there should be term limits, or they should be elected. How is that legitimate in a
Well,
constitutional republic?
a lot of people say agree with you, and I also agree that people like that shouldn't be on the bench. But the Constitution prescribes how long a federal judge can stay on the bench, and also gives authority to the executive branch as well as Congress to decide that, as well as how many judges should be on the bench.
And they
So, but
they can't be removed.
well, they can be removed for bad conduct, but it's almost impossible. You would basically have to have an all
Act of God.
conservative or like an all conservative or all libertarian court because the Marxist Democrats want those people on the bench. So good luck getting rid of them.
All right. Sorry,
So
back to
that's
the bar. Sorry, man.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So, so just to get back to the Knights Templar castle.
Mhm.
So my understanding is after the Knights Templar left that castle, our first what you could call a law school, our first inns of court were established to create lawyers for the common man. So there were no longer these religious courts. There were religious courts, but now we had commoners learning the law and becoming what they call lawyers. But because the king would not allow lawyers within the gates of London, they went into the castle that was outside the gates of London. And the chain that went across the door of the castle, or the drawbridge, whatever you want to call it, was referenced to be called, was called the B.A.R. Okay, it was literally called the B.A.R. And just really quickly, let me see if I can
The
find.
chains that held the drawbridge of the London gates, or
Well, not necessarily that. Not the
why would they
drawbridge.
call it a bar? Are they actual bar, or was it a chain? Why is it called the
It was a
bar?
chain, but they just called it the B.A.R. I don't know why. I
Okay,
mean, it's old
okay,
English stuff, you know.
okay.
But let me just see if I can find, because I did some research for y'all, because I figured you guys would be asking me these questions.
Yeah,
So
I could
really
I could
quickly,
pester you all day with this stuff.
no, I want to, because this is why I have my channel. I want to educate people and teach them about natural law and what makes American common law different as well as similar to English common law. Remember, the Bill of Rights changed English common law, but we still kept the same concepts of our courts from the English. So what I'll do is just kind of give you a little history. So the term bar in the context of the Knights Templar castle outside London refers, according to some resources, as the Temple Bar, which was the historic gateway marking the boundary between the city of London and Westminster, adjacent to the Temple area. And this was once the stronghold of the Knights Templar. So the chains across the bridge that led into the temple was often called the bar as well. It's just what they called it.
Okay.
So many historians say that that's where it comes from, but because it led to the temple bar. Is this making sense? The temple bar.
So when they
Okay.
say pass the bar, they're saying you're good enough to enter the king's court, so to speak.
No, you're actually no, because the king had his own lex rex or rex lex. He had his own. So Rex Lex means the law is the king, and Lex Rex means, strike that. Rex Lex means the king is the law, and
Okay.
that's American common law.
So when you
Strike that.
pass the bar, you've attained enough knowledge to pass this bar that let you into where?
Well, that comes later, but
Okay.
yes, so that comes later with the evolution of the English common law system, or law for the commoner.
Hmm.
But the temple bar was blocked by a chain, and you would have to pass that chain or go over the chain or under it, however they did it, in order to enter the temple bar, which is where these early lawyers were first trained or housed. And it was just simply a chain or bar that stretched between posts to control access and regulate trade in and out of London. Is this making sense so far? It led to the Knights Castle where the Templars were housed. Okay,
Okay.
I'm hoping this is making sense. Okay,
I'm
so
trying.
okay, and we can go over it more later, but the origins of the temple bar is basically there was a temple church, and there still is, located to the south within the area known as the temple. And this is where the Knights Templar were established it in the 12th century. The Templars built their headquarters, including the temple church, which was consecrated in 1185 on land granted by King Henry II. This area became a significant religious and financial center. So the term bar refers to the barrier or gate, a common feature in medieval cities to control entry points. So I'm hoping this is making more sense to you. Now, at the Temple Bar, a barrier was first documented in 1293, and it likely consisted of chain or wood between posts. And again, that was to regulate trade in and out. So that castle basically was like the checkpoint, right? And you could, and also in order to enter the temple bar, you had to pass across to get into the temple bar,
Okay.
right? So in its earliest form, it was probably a chain based on the 1293 records. And then after the Battle of Evesham in 1265, Prince Edward, later Edward I, confiscated London street chains and bars, including those at the Temple Bar, as punishment for the city's support of Simon de Montfort, storing them in the Tower of London. By 1351, a more substantial wooden archway with a small prison above it had been constructed, indicating the evolution from a chain to a structured gateway. Now, the Knights Templar were founded around 1119, and they established their London headquarters near the River Fleet before moving to the new temple in the 1160s, approximately. Their compound included a round temple church, residences, and training facilities. The Knights Templar didn't directly manage the Temple Bar. Its proximity to their land and its name reflect their influence on the area. So this is just a little bit of historical context for where the term bar comes from. Okay? All right. So their wealth and power, including their role as early bankers, made the temple a significant hub, and it served as a jurisdictional marker near London, near their property as well. And so after the Templars were dissolved in 1312, their lands, including the temple, were transferred to the Knights of Hospitaller. You've ever heard of those guys, the Knights of Hospitaller? They actually helped. They fought alongside the Knights Templar during the Crusades, just so you guys know. So basically, the Knights Hospitaller leased parts of the castle to lawyers, specifically the inner and middle temples, two of London's first Inns of Court. And so I was a member of the American Inns of Court, by the way. And so that would be, I guess, the closest thing that you could ever find to a law school or bar association, but they didn't have law schools. That you learned how to become a lawyer the same way you would learn to be a stonemason. So you would get a job as an apprentice, and you would basically, just like taking judo, right? It's almost like a belt system. Once the lawyer and the judges felt that you'd reached a certain level, they would invite you to pass this bar that they created based upon apparently the actual bar or chain that blocked London and the temple. So that's just the evolution. So basically, by the 17th century, the temple bar became a ceremonial gateway. It's still there. The Great Fire of London in 1666 burned it down. It was rebuilt in 1669. And in 1672, it was attributed to Sir Christopher Wren with a grand Portland stone arch featuring statues of the Stuart monarchs. This structure replaced earlier wooden incarnations and no longer relied on chains, reflecting the shift to permanent architecture. So now, the Knights Templar it was not a traditional castle that was fortified. It was more like, it was not like a fortified stronghold like you would have in London, okay? It was basically just their London headquarters. And again, it was turned over to the Knights Hospitaller. And so that is the beginning of where we start hearing about bar. So in the post-Templar
era, what's on the other side of the bar? Like where are they going when they pass this bar?
In and out of the gates of London on your way to the castle. And
we're not even at the stage where you're in a courtroom, or so to speak.
Well, it became adopted because of that bar, and because the lawyers were trained at the temple leading in and out of the bar that would allow you to enter into London. That was just how it evolved.
Okay.
So the term bar and the chains and all that stuff just sort of became what the modern bar is. So at least that's what many historians say, John. I mean, again, there's a lot of lost history.
Sure.
So this is back in the 1100s.
Right.
So, yeah. So the term bar, with respect to the modern bar, probably does come from that ceremonial gateway in London, marking the boundary between the City of London and Westminster in the nearby Temple area. The legal connotation as it relates to the bar and courtrooms has to do with the barrier separating the lawyers from others, from people outside the well.
The little double door you always have to walk past,
right? Yeah, that's called the well. Once you pass that door, you're in the well. But once you pass the bar, typically that is the bar. They used to have a bar that separated the judge from everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the historic bar. And so
now it's figurative, basically, right?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. All right.
So the modern legal profession, particularly barristers, which I'm not a solicitor or a barrister, and I have nothing to do with England. I'm an American.
They still call them barristers over in the UK, don't they?
Well, yeah, they have barristers and solicitors. So my understanding is
between those two.
My understanding is the solicitor does all the litigation work, the paperwork, and then the barrister argues the case in front of a judge. So I do both. So that's why they call us attorneys. And I believe that comes from the Latin or German word attornatus, So I can, man, it would take me 5 hours to cover all this stuff.
All right.
But so the Inner Temple and Middle Temple are really where these lawyers were trained. And basically, let me just kind of go through my notes really quick.
While you're looking at that, so
Yeah.
where does this British Accreditation Registry thing come from?
Well, it's made up. There's no such thing as a British Accreditation Registry. We're going to get into that in a minute.
Okay, all right.
Um, so yeah, so by the 12th or 13th centuries, legal roles were often filled by clerics from the Catholic Church, right? But then, of course, they had Anglican clerics because they basically mirrored what the Catholic Church did, but now they were the Church of England, so they were subservient to the king. The king didn't want to have a pope that had power over him. That was really what King Henry was all about. He did not want. He was like, my rights come from God. I am almighty, and I'm not going to take orders from the pope. And so that's why he established the Church of England. And so what ended up happening is typically there were clerics and royal officials, but they didn't really decide legal matters for commoners unless it was an offense against the king. So, for example, if I had a dispute with you, I would engage in a blood feud, or right. So then they developed the tort system, which is what I practice now. They used to have a system called a pound of flesh, right? So you would get your justice by getting a pound of flesh from the person who took the life of your wife or your kids. And again, they didn't even have a wrongful death tort system until much later. But if you had stolen someone's chattel or cattle, for example, or damaged their property, you could sue them in a court. And they had courts of chancery and all these different courts. But ultimately, it evolved to where we had commoners' courts or common law courts over the years. So King during the reigns of James I and Charles I, they admitted 1,700 students between 1600 and 1640 to become lawyers, basically, into that Templar site. And so this is the earliest formalized group of English common law lawyers. Hope this is making sense. But they also trained chancery lawyers and other types of lawyers, religious type lawyers that would decide religious types of things. Now, let me just try to see if I can find any more stuff.
Is common law still a thing in the United States? Because you hear things like common law marriage.
Yeah. Now we're American common law.
Okay.
And in fact, most of our legal system is based upon English common law and our case law. If you read Blackstone's commentaries on the English law, most of our laws come from England, except where they're abrogated by the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Because again, our Bill of Rights and Constitution recognize that the true sovereign is we the people, not the king. Is this making sense?
Yeah, we're the king individually.
That's right. We all became sovereign, but we would elect representatives to exercise that sovereign power.
And now they use that as a pejorative, the government.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't want to get into that too much, but
okay,
we could definitely talk about that. So
okay.
So
let me ask again, and I hope I'm not throwing you off track, but the 7th Amendment says something like, in any matters of common law where the penalty is more than $20, you have a right to a jury, right?
Correct.
So can you explain that a little bit?
Well, that's really interesting.
Because everything is over $20 now.
That's right. Well, I'm gonna have to do a deep dive on that, because I know where you're headed with that. And
all right,
there's case law that's that's changed things, and I think that's where guys like, what's the matter, you have a problem, and I do too. But so we do need to get into that, because that's something that's really, really important for us to discuss. But so
the 7th Amendment is pretty much non-existent at this point, right? Kind of like the 3rd Amendment.
Well, no, it is. But so let's get into really quickly. I'm gonna share the first video to show you where this whole concept comes from. So these guys, the hold on, let me just find the video. Oops. Let me just find the video that I want to show you. So it all starts with these guys. All right. Can you hopefully do this?
The people that were involved in that compound would have been described as salt of the earth. What made them vulnerable to this?
If you've lost everything you own and Schweitzer stands up there and tells you, I'm going to help you get it back, my God, of course you're going to jump at it.
Now you're probably old enough to remember the Freeman of Montana, but a lot of my viewers probably don't. But
Not really, no. I don't know if it's my age or I just never heard of him, because I'm shocked, honestly, that I never heard that before.
well, these are the guys who talked about going after the fidelity bonds of public servants who violated their oaths of office and suing them. And I believe that they were within their constitutional rights to do exactly what they were doing. But the statutory courts disagreed and threw them in jail. But Barry Schweitzer, I believe was his name, was the founder of the Freeman of Montana. And I actually went to one of their seminars at some point when I was younger. So I was really into this stuff. So
Is a
Yeah.
fidelity bond and a surety bond two different things? Is that the same thing? And
Uh,
what is it? Is that like an insurance policy? What is it? What is a fidelity bond?
a fidelity bond is different. A fidelity bond is basically where you take your oath of office and you sign it, and you have to get a bond to assure that if someone sues you or something, you damage someone, that your bond can cover the damages. If you violate your oath of office as a public servant, that you could put a lien against that fidelity bond. And so
Sure.
they were getting liens against these fidelity bonds, and then they were cashing them in and getting money from banks and stuff.
Well, what's
They
wrong
got
with that?
well, I don't think there is, but I'm
Okay.
not giving you guys legal advice to say that you can, because anybody who does that ends up going to prison. All
Why
right?
though? Why?
Because again, the statutory courts are not honoring them. It's plain and simple. They're just not honoring them. So, and that's why I'm a
And that's
proponent.
what I want. That's what I want to say. Ultimately, the king or the sovereign is the one who can and has enough firepower or manpower to defend himself, because ultimately it all comes down to violence, war, etc. Right? Who has the force and the manpower necessary? Because the courts say there, if it says the law says you can lean on somebody's fidelity bond, and the courts say no, the reason we follow the courts is because they have all the monopoly on force. No,
Well, Mao Zedong did say that all power flows from the barrel of a gun, right?
it does. I mean, honestly, when you cut through all the BS and the Latin and all that stuff, they have the most organized force.
Well, I
Now,
don't think
if
anybody would argue.
5,000 guys showed up, if 5,000 guys with AR showed up and said, no, the fidelity bond says this, and you're going to enforce it the way it's written, not the way you feel like. That's where you start getting into. That's why I say Supreme Court my ass, because if enough of us unite and say, just show up, not necessarily pull any triggers, just show up and say, no, it says this is how we're going to do it.
Well, I think that the Republic was destroyed with the creation of the Jekyll Island debacle
Oh
and
yeah.
the creation of the privately run Federal Reserve banking
Oh yeah, of
system.
course.
But again, that's another conversation for another day.
Edward Griffin, the creature from Jekyll Island. He's
Right.
93 years old, by the way, but go ahead.
But again, that's why I'm a proponent of you guys who are against what's going on in this country to get involved. I mean, look what the Marxists have done. The rainbow flag, blue-haired mafia took over the school boards. The NEA is run by a self-professed Marxist.
The what?
The National Education Association.
Okay.
The California Teacher Association, radical Marxist, anti-American communist. And they're the ones pushing the school curriculum and brainwashing your children. And that's why I'm a big time proponent of homeschooling your kids, getting them off of that brain rot that they're brainwashing our kids with. And then that.
So when
Go
you
ahead.
say Marxist, you mean collective, everything is distributed evenly, there's no individuality.
Well, a little more than that, because Marxism, they found when they tried to do critical theory, which was something that Barack Obama and most of his Harvard buddies are big time fans of, which is critical theory basically is the theory from Marxism that rich people are evil and you need to redistribute their wealth to make things fair, right? But that didn't work out because under the American system, everybody wants to get rich and they don't want to have all their money taxed away to give to lazy asses that don't want to work.
And the
So,
issue with that is if that guy worked his whole life and accomplished all these things, and now you can just come and take it,
right.
Everyone, the standard, there's no standard. It just becomes an example somebody gave me one time is you have a classroom.
Right.
There's four out of the 30 students are A+ students. The rest are C. So if you did it the Marxist way or socialist way, it's kind of the same thing, right? Where you average out everybody's grades to where everyone has a B, so to speak.
Right. Everyone gets a trophy.
So
Right.
now the students who were A+ students are getting punished for being A+ students.
Absolutely.
And they're
privileged. They're privileged because they had more money or they had white parents, and it has nothing to do with them being smart. It's just that since they're white, they're privileged and they have more.
Nonsense. So then the C students get bumped up to a B.
Yeah.
And then over time, the A+ students are like, why should I try harder? And slowly but surely, everything declines.
You just described a trade union.
Oh, is that what that is?
Well, absolutely. You have half the workers standing around with their hand out, and the ones who are productive, the ones that should be getting the raise, collectively have to give away what they earned to these other people who didn't earn it. And that's what unions are all about.
So, I was in the restaurant business, so there's the same thing there. Some restaurants will pool their tips.
Right.
So you can have a superstar server who makes $100 a night, and then you can have a mediocre server who makes $30. Now you average it out, it's 130, so they each get $65 each. Now the person who's doing all the work is like, this guy doesn't even shower when he comes into work. I'm making most of the tips, and why should I have to average it out? Versus the way it should be, where each server keeps their own tips and gets what they're worth because of their skills, specifically as an individual.
You're preaching to the choir, man. That is Marxism. That's plain and simple. But what ended up happening is because critical theory didn't work, that grand experiment where they keep saying it was always the wrong communism, we have to do it the right way, right? They always forgot about human nature, that the power brokers wanted to coalesce their power and create a proletariat, right? So all the high party officials in the Soviet Union would get the nice cars and the nice hotels, the nice apartments, because they have to have it because they represent the people, comrade. But basically, that's exactly how it works. And so what they did is they started something called critical race theory. Yeah. Because class warfare didn't work for the Marxists, like the public school teacher unions and whatnot, and the Democrats, the modern Democrats. I used to be a Democrat. I'm a recovering Democrat. I can't be part of this abomination that is the Democrat Party today. But now they push this thing called critical race theory, where they teach all the black kids that white people are evil oppressors and that they're all victims and oppressed, right? Like that somehow is going to create racial unity, right?
No.
Right. So, so now we're hated, especially white males, because of critical race theory, which is pushed in the public school systems.
That segregates us even more.
Absolutely. It goes against everything that Martin Luther King stood for. And you're talking to a guy who slept on park benches to become a lawyer with no law degree or undergrad. So it's just funny when they tell me that I'm privileged, because I don't see any of these guys on Section 8 housing and getting free welfare checks from the government trying to do that. And why would they? Because they're happy staying home playing Nintendo, right? But somehow I'm privileged.
Right. Same here. I'm like, when this crap started appearing on social media, I said, when does my white privilege kick in? Because I was working 65 hours a week over a hot grill. So when does my white privilege kick in? I thought I was white.
Right, but so that's basically what, just to give the evolution. So the court systems, as well as the law schools, which were created much, much later. Remember, our early lawyers went to the Inns of Court. They studied under a judge or a lawyer, like, Abe Lincoln, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys didn't go to a law school, and so what would happen is, since they didn't have, in the United States, in the early birth of this country, didn't have access to the Inns of Courts in England anymore. They primarily read from Blackstone's commentaries on the English law, and they became lawyers doing it the traditional way of studying under a judge or a lawyer. And then what would happen is, once the judge and the lawyer felt that they were ready, they would take an oral examination before the judges, maybe one judge, maybe two, maybe three. And mind you, they would be going to lunch with the judges and the lawyers and learning how to become a lawyer, reading from Blackstone's commentaries on the English law. And then at that point, they would be admitted to pass the bar. So that's what that means, passing the bar. There was no bar examination, no written examination.
What is
And
Blackstone's commentary? Tell me what that is.
So Sir William Blackstone was a very famous English jurist, lawyer. And it's how, and I've read it several times. You have to buy the version that's in lay English, because it's written in traditional English. So you'll fall asleep after the first couple of sentences. But if you have the gumption to learn a little bit about ancient English, you'll understand it. But it's basically it basically teaches natural law, John Locke's natural law, and that's where our Bill of Rights comes from, and the fact that we're all sovereigns and that our rights come from our Creator, which is what our Declaration of Independence says, that our rights come from an all-powerful Creator. Is this making sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So now, the British Accreditation Registry, I'm going to show, well, it was started by the Freeman of Montana and the sovereign citizen movement. And also, the term Esquire, that's a misconception. So lawyers modernly in the United States, we don't have the title Esquire. A lot of us put it behind our names, and I put it behind my name on my letterhead because I think it looks cool. But it's not a title of nobility because it was never granted. The title of nobility can only be granted by the king. So it's just sort of a tradition that just sort of carried over from English common law. And so a lot of lawyers use it, but judges are supposed to set their bar memberships aside because they're not supposed to be a member of the bar while they are judges. At least that's my understanding. It could be different depending on your jurisdiction, but they're supposed to just be judges. So typically they let their bar memberships go inactive while they sit on the bench, just to avoid the appearance that they're a member of the bar or beholden to another organization. And we'll get more into the bars and what they are.
Now, is it what, 2 states or 3 states where you don't have to go to law school to become a lawyer?
Well, California is one of them. I passed what's called it's called the CLEP, but it's an acronym for gosh, well, I'll think of it in a minute. But basically, it gives you. I got the equivalence of an AA degree by taking the CLEP, and it was I had to do English composition with essay, social sciences, and history. I believe that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Alaska has a similar program. I think Vermont has a similar program. In my book, actually, I have in the book that I did called My Journey to Becoming a Practicing Lawyer with No Law Degree or Undergrad, which I sell for $19.99 on my YouTube channel. If you do the description drop down, I sell the digital version of this soft cover that you saw, and it goes into the different states at the time that I wrote this book that offered that program, and I talked about my journey, how I did it. But in California, the way it works, John, is you take the You take the college level equivalency program. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. And then you have to take the B.A.R, which is contracts, torts, and criminal law. And then if you pass that after your first year, it's called the first year law students exam. Then you can continue on the program. And then after 4 years of studying under a lawyer or a judge, or many lawyers, I studied under multiple lawyers as well as a judge, then you're eligible to take the full bar exam. And I passed the regular bar exam, and I became a lawyer with no law degree or undergrad doing that. And that is more of the traditional way, but we didn't have written exams, so it's not totally the same way. It's not really the Lincoln method, right?
So why do some states allow you to do that and some states don't?
Well, because the 10th Amendment makes states sovereign, and a lot of states, it really started, honestly, the traditional methodology of becoming a lawyer and the advent of law schools, based on my research, really had to do with the Democrat Party's aversion to allowing black people to become lawyers. So they created a system where you had to go to a college and then to a law school and spend money. And in the original American Bar Association, I think a lot of them were Klansmen, and they just didn't like black people. Remember, the Democrats are the party of the Ku Klux Klan, for you people who don't know your history. So they did not want black people to become lawyers. So the traditional methods of becoming a lawyer were abolished, and only a few states kept programs like that. Remember, California didn't become a state until 1849. So it's just something that was built into their constitution. My guess is because it was still a frontier state, and like Abraham Lincoln, they needed lawyers in the frontier. So Abraham Lincoln moved west, and they allowed him to pass their oral exam, their bar exam that they had, because they needed lawyers in the West. And so probably that's why California kept it. I'll have to do some more historical research on that.
All right.
But the bottom line is, I'm going to show you another video now, because I want to show you a little bit about what people are spreading on the internet and why so many people come on your show and mine and say, oh, you're a traitor, you're a member of the British Accreditation Registry and all that. And it's because of the sovereign citizen movement, with Barry Schweitzer leading the way to doing that. But let's really quickly just do this next video, and then I'll break it down why this woman is wrong about everything that she's saying. It's really amazing. I'm hoping that you guys are getting a good education. Give me a bunch of ones in the comment section if you're learning something. And then anybody who wants to throw me a super chat or buy some memberships for new people, if I see a little red box or a blue box pop up, I'll be sure to answer any questions that you guys have. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share this next video with you guys. Give me 1 second, get this thing set up. It's only 6 minutes.
All right, y'all. So I just want to ask you a question. This is the question. Have you ever tried to get an attorney's bar number and you cannot figure out what their bar number is, no matter what kind of search you do on whatever engine it is, and you just can't find their bar number? You ask them for it and they won't give it to you. You ask other attorneys for that attorney's bar number and they won't give it to you. Well, one reason why they won't give it to you is because they're in a secret bar guild. As members, they won't do that to each other. That's one thing. Another reason they don't want to give it to you is because you can use it for financial gain when these public officers and servants are creating controversy by harming you, commercially and otherwise speaking. So I had this judge that I've been looking for his bar number for 3 years. I'm serious, 3 years, and I could not find it. And about a month ago, I was doing some investigative work, again looking for his bar number, when I found this 2018 financial statement wherein he goes by Dale P. Nelson, and couldn't find anything else. So I was like, wow, I'm just running like a fast car up against a brick wall, right into the brick wall. I mean, something is just not right. Why can't I find the bar number? I'd worked for attorneys in past years in the 90s, and I had a couple of attorneys or few attorneys in the past 20 years. I've also presented myself, and in multiple occasions I've done writs of habeas corpus on my own. I've done plenty of types of motions. I've actually won a couple of times where I received at least monetary benefit from my actions or motions that I put into the court. So I was familiar with things, and I couldn't seem to get this judge's bar number from anyone. Not even the clerk would release it. The clerk of the court, Navajo County clerk of the court. So about 3 weeks later, about a week or so ago, this was brought back to my attention. So I came to the computer and I pulled it up, just like I did here right now. I said Dale Nielsen in the search engine, financial report 2018, and boom, it came up. So then I was like, okay, so I know what's wrong. I'm looking at something that's not current, I said, because I have to look at it as evidence, right? So if it's not current, I said, then I'm going to.
So just really quickly, I just want to point something out, John, before we get into the video any further. So judges typically do not remain active members of the bar once they take the bench. They typically will resign their bar association memberships upon assuming judicial office. And this is supposedly to avoid conflicts of interest and to maintain impartiality. Because obviously, if you're a member of my bar association and I'm a lawyer before your court, that could present a potential conflict of interest and have the appearance of impropriety. However, like I said earlier, some jurisdictions do allow judges to retain memberships in the bar, but they usually cannot practice law while serving as judges. Now, I know that in California, commissioners typically are able to remain active members of the bar, and they'll still do practice law, but they're not full-fledged judges, just to kind of give you a little. So each state has its own regulatory framework, but I don't know what state she's in. But so far, she's not correct, and that's probably why she couldn't find this judge's bar number. Now, we're going to get into the video some more, John. Do you have any questions before I get back on the video?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm going to get one that is, so I put financial report 2021, Dale P. Nelson, Arizona. And bam,
Arizona, okay.
There it is, right there. And on this one, while I'm sitting here looking at it, I see Dale Park Nelson, and I'm thinking, well, okay, maybe that's why I needed to see this document, because he's using a different name. That's when I went back to my search engine and I said Dale Park Nelson, Arizona, because that's the state he's an attorney in, and then attorney. And boom, all this stuff pops up. I'm like, oh boy. I know about Martindale, so I was like, I'm gonna look this up and see what this is. And then bam, this showed up. Now this is the martindale.com/attorney/ and then you put the attorney's name and their number that comes up from this website. That is specifically his website, but it's for his name, but it's the martindale.com website. So when you go to Martindale, let me just click on martindale.com for y'all. So when you go to martindale.com, let's see, then you click on the search button, and this comes down, it says search tools. Then you say attorneys and law firm search, and bam, there it is. And we're going to just look up the next attorney that, attempted to hide her bar number.
Okay, so one thing that they teach us in law is that you're not supposed to assume facts not in evidence. So she's saying that he's hidden his bar number, right? He's trying to hide it. Well, it's not this judge who's hiding it. Unfortunately, it looks like it's Arizona. Arizona doesn't seem to have a public access website that gives you the names of judges. Let me show you. So I just did a search for Dale Park Nelson on the Arizona State Bar website, and it says that I have to be an attorney and to log in order to check that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the public, and I'm going to see if I can find this guy on the public search. So, and I don't see anything here. It's for the public. It has a law. It has a video law library. Hire a certified specialist. Need a speaker. It doesn't have anything. It's got a public records request form, but it doesn't have an attorney search. All right. So really quickly now, I'm going to show you in California how that's different. So we're not a member of some secret society or anything like that. Every bar association, it's a membership organization, is different. And I'm just going to show. I'm going to show you how easy it is to find a lawyer in California.
If you're a member of the bar, what does that even mean? That you pass
just a member of an organization that decides the standards for lawyers. And then you can see that's me. I don't know if you can see it that well, but I just did it in 5 seconds. So that's me in California. And now I'm gonna go to Texas and type in Texas. Here, you guys can watch me do it. Texas State Bar, Michael Ehline. And lo and behold, there I am. Hopefully you guys can see that. So, well, hold on. Now it moved to a different screen. There I am. So there's Michael Ehline. Let me have to scroll down for you to see it better. There you go. See my picture there?
Yeah.
Got my tuxedo on. So it's no secret organization. It just looks like the Arizona State Bar makes it more difficult for you to find lawyers.
Do you have to be a member of the bar to practice law?
You have to be an admitted member of the bar to practice law in whatever state that you're in. And each state has its own bar association and its own rules. And they decide what's going to be on the bar exam as well. Okay. So because of the 10th Amendment, it has nothing to do with Britain or any of this garbage, all right? It just makes me chuckle.
Is there one bar association, or is there several bar associations, or?
There's several different types of bar associations. I could start the Michael Ehline Bar Association tomorrow if I want to, but it wouldn't accredit lawyers. The state bar associations are the bar associations that accredit lawyers with permission of the Supreme Court of their respective states. So they'll submit rules and ideas and things that they want to license. It's actually not a license to accredit lawyers, and then the Supreme Court will accept or reject. And then if the Supreme Court signs off on it, then the Bar Association will basically administer the lawyer. So I have to pay unfortunately an outrageous fee, like over $500 a year. And I've got to do continuing legal education where I have to go to seminars to make sure that I'm up to date on the most modern case law.
Like being an HVAC person.
Yeah, or being an insurance broker, or anything else. You have to be up to date and in good order, like somebody who's a member of the militia. So let me just make sure.
This sounds like something that should be instituted for police, no?
I think so. They do have post-training, and I do think that police do have continuing education courses based on lawsuits that I've done. But each jurisdiction is going to be different because there's state, city, and local police, municipal cops, sheriff, whatever it is.
When you say Supreme Court, you're talking about the state Supreme Court.
Correct. The state Supreme Courts, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the federal courts, I don't believe there's a federal bar association. So for me to become a member of the DC bar, which enables me to practice law in the District of Columbia, I just have to pay the fee and get sworn in at the Supreme Court. And I think you can do it telephonically now or on a Zoom, but I'm not a member of the DC bar. I have no desire to be, at least not right now. I'm not a Marxist Democrat in that 90% Marxist Democrat state, so they're going to hate my guts. So basically what she did is she was able to find out information about this guy in Martindale-Hubbell, which is basically a private company that provides information about lawyers that it's able to get from fellow members who list their names on Martindale Hubble. And so she's acting like this is a really big deal. Oh, look what I found. He was hiding it, but I was able to find it. Well, let's keep listening.
Number on me, and I find it quite easily. And all you have to know is their name or some variation of it, either Julie A. Garcia, or know her middle name, or do it just Julie Garcia, and it'll work. And they call these numbers, as you'll note here, they call these numbers ISLN numbers. So I was like, what is an ISLN number?
It's the number that Martindale Hubble uses internally, but let's let her keep talking.
If not a bar number. Well, ISLN stands for the International Standard Lawyer Number, and it's the Martindale Hubble alphabetical.
Right, it's their alphabetical index because Martindale Hubble lists lawyers all over the world, but she's making it sound like it's this big deal. And people who watch this, they believe this crap. So I just want you guys to understand this is ridiculous, but keep on watching.
Index, okay? So they are registered under this alphabetical index,
Oh my God.
which has their bar number, which
my
is
God.
the ISLN number.
Oh
They don't
God.
call it a bar number anymore, people. Wake
It's
up.
not a bar number.
So what?
It's not a bar. Yeah, so that's what I said when I watched it. But people buy this stuff.
Well,
So-
buy what though? What is there to buy?
She's trying to say that that is a British Accreditation Registry number. Even though she didn't lay a foundation, she's got no evidence, nothing. So really quick, let me get you back up on the screen. So I just want you guys, I'm going to go ahead and recite some case law now.
Can I ask
Right.
a quick question before you go forward?
Absolutely. Go
What
for it, brother.
What is a tort or tort law?
Okay, tort is just personal injury law. Tort means to twist. It comes from a French word, to twist, to torque or to twist.
Now I've heard that because my big thing is the driver's license. I think it's been weaponized against the people.
Well,
And-
I agree. Go ahead.
So can tort law replace the driver's license system?
No. So tort law is just basically the way we classify personal injury law. So that would include wrongful death, battery, assault, trespass to property, trespass to land, trespass to chattel, private nuisance, public nuisance, and so on. It really doesn't have anything to do with the driver's licensing
Well-
system. Go ahead.
If you got rid of the driver's license and you hurt somebody on the road, is that not a personal injury or a tort, so to speak?
Well, I mean, yeah, somebody could sue you civilly for that, of course.
But you can't replace the driver's license system with that?
No, the tort law still applies to anybody who gets in an accident. The licensing system originally was created for commercial vehicles.
Yes.
Right. Just like income taxes are profits severed from capital, which
Yeah,
means you
from
don't have to
gain.
incorporate.
From
Right.
gain.
Dude, we're on the same page, bro.
Okay.
We'll do another show about that another time because
All right.
you and I both we like Adam Schiff.
The thing is, you're a real lawyer, and I'm just a crazy conspiracy theorist. You have you have the knowledge and the know-how and the research, whereas I research this stuff, but I can't decipher what's what without actually asking somebody like you, who knows a lot better than me and can confirm or deny what I'm asking or talking about.
Well, I mean, all I can tell you is that every conspiracy theory has come true that I'm aware of.
Pretty much.
So yeah. So let's get back in, and hopefully Gloria's still here. Bye, Gloria. Good seeing you. Gloria's a really great.
Gloria.
She's one of my best moderators besides
Nice
What's
to
the Matter.
meet you.
I really
Thanks for
really
coming.
dig her. Yeah, she's awesome.
All right.
Right on, Gloria. Cool. Thanks for sticking around for a few more minutes. Let me see here.
And why is it called a tort? Why is it
I
called a
think
tort?
somebody said they think I'm a cop. That's funny.
They say that about me. There's actually stuff on the internet that said I used to be a cop. I'm a lawyer. I used to be a cop, an ordained minister. Like,
Look, I wouldn't mind being a peace officer if I didn't have to toe that thin blue line. I'd like to be able to get out there and support the Constitution in the
When
Bill of
I was
Rights.
a kid, yeah, when I was a kid, because in most people's minds, a cop is someone there to protect you and to uphold, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, aka your rights as an American. But the way
That's
it's
not
set up
true.
now is they do the exact opposite.
Police have no duty to protect individuals. Municipal police serve the municipal corporation. Sheriffs are the Shire of the Reef. They're supposed to protect the rights of the people. But it's been abominized and destroyed with the modern system that we live under. And we can have a conversation about that another
So
time.
the police don't even seem constitutional to me at all. Like you said, they work for a corporation when the
Right.
corporation is the municipality, aka the city.
Yeah, they have no duty to protect individuals. That has
But
been decided
do
by
sheriff-
I think
what
the
about
Warren
sheriffs?
case.
Do sheriffs have a duty to protect and preserve?
Constitutionally, they do, and based on common law, they do.
What
But
about in reality, though?
in reality, they're not doing that.
They're not much better than the regular police, right? Or
They're basically no different than municipal police, but for the county, unfortunately. But there are some good sheriffs that do support the Constitution. I think in Montana you might find a couple, but ultimately, a real peace officer or sheriff, their job is to do justice, not raise revenue.
Yeah,
Municipal cops, in order to establish a municipal corporation, when you originally set up your plot and your proposal to the state or the county to set up a municipal city, because it's a corporation, you have to show how much money you're going to generate in traffic tickets and fines and whatnot. So basically, municipal police have been relegated to becoming basically tax collectors and fundraisers.
revenue generation agency.
Revenue, yeah, that's right. That's really all they are, to be honest.
They really are.
Now, but there are some decent cops out there. And I know you guys all hate cops who, because I've represented several of them who are whistleblowers who got fired for not towing the thin blue line.
But that's what happens to good cops.
They get fired. That's right. So,
Or they get put on the worst shifts, or they're sent into danger zones where their lives are at risk, and
right.
they get ostracized.
They get constructively terminated.
Yes.
I've represented several cops that have been constructively terminated. So I'm able to look at it from both points of view, because I agree that they should be preserving.
The 95% make the other 5% look bad.
I would say more like 97%
You don't know.
or more. Yeah.
Well, I would say that 97% of the time I'm right, and I don't care about the other 4%.
Yeah, right.
Right.
That's probably a fair statement.
Okay.
Oh, look, we have our Marxist friend Wedding Cake who showed up. Good seeing you, comrade. I hope that you have fun burning the American flag. I'm glad you joined us today. So,
is that a hater?
just somebody who doesn't support, in my opinion, the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. But I'm glad that he or they, them, or whatever it is showed up.
Can I tell you a quick story? Because
Sure,
I've been talking Constitution since the 90s. And when I had a restaurant, I would preach this stuff to my employees. And I was in the middle of Florida, which is podunk redneck, right?
Yeah.
And I had this server, and I started talking about the Bill of Rights. And as soon as we get done, she immediately goes out in the dining room and asks another server if my mother and I are illegal aliens. And the other server's like, why would you think that? And she goes, because the only person that know that kind of stuff are illegal aliens.
That's funny. That is funny. How would she know that? Is she an illegal alien too?
Well, because there's a lot of orange groves in Central Florida, and a lot of the guys who work the groves had to take citizenship tests, and those are the kind of questions that are asked in citizenship tests.
Oh,
so she thought it was odd for some guy who grew up in America to actually know the Bill of Rights and Constitution. So she immediately equated me to being an illegal.
And that's why I'm a proponent of homeschooling, because these public school teachers they don't teach you anything other than to be a good, loyal Marxist Democrat flag burner. But
a wage slave.
Yeah, so the sovereign citizen movement is primarily responsible for this British Accreditation Registry thing. But I just gave you guys the historical meaning of B.A.R. So take it or leave it. If you want to believe what these guys say, that's fine. But I'll also give you some case law, okay? So there's a case called Sharp versus American Bar Association. And the Donald Tommy Sharp was a federal pretrial detainee. He filed a pro se civil complaint on August 26 of 2021 against the ABA, the American Bar Association, which, by the way, the American Bar Association does not accredit lawyers. It's basically a collegial association that was started by basically Klansmen, the KKK and Democrats, to basically have almost like a little membership organization, a collegial organization of a bunch of old white guys, right? And they were very racist and very bigoted, and they didn't allow black people to join. And so the black people started their own bar association. Like, I can't remember the name of it, but to this day, it's still going and it's still running strong. And I'll try to get that information for you guys.
Can I add a bit of trivia there?
Yeah, but Sharp alleged that the ABA and its members were part of a racketeering, influenced, corrupt organization. It basically filed a RICO claim against them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he claimed that the term bar stood for British Accreditation Registry. And he asserted that ABA members were loyal to Britain and held titles of nobility, Esquire, making them ineligible to hold public office under the U.S. Constitution. Well, first of all, the only lawyers I know of that hold public office would be like a city attorney, right? City manager or a prosecutor. I don't hold any public office.
Right.
Okay, I'm a lawyer licensed in California and Texas. And I primarily help guys when I started, help get guys like him out of jail. My email is, issue the writ, right? Maybe you don't know that one, but yeah, that was my first email address. Issue the writ of habeas corpus, issue the writ of mandate, issue the writ of coram nobis, right? So
now, why is so much Latin involved in legalese, and why isn't it just plain English?
Because originally our courts, again, were ecclesiastical courts of chancery, for example, that started under the Catholic Church. And so the official legal language, when we broke off and started common law courts or courts for the common man, borrowed that same model. That's all. It's just a model that they borrowed because that's how the law was. And it was a universal language. Anyone who was somewhat educated spoke Latin. Remember, most people were highly intelligent. Even commoners could speak Latin, many of them. Our founding fathers, most of them spoke at least 5 to 7 languages, right? And they wrote cursive, which has been eliminated by our Marxist-run school system today because they want a nation of workers and idiots, not of thinkers, right?
Right.
So the term British Accreditation Registry, he is saying, means that makes them loyal to Britain and they belong to this British Accreditation Registry, and that's what bar means, according to this guy. And that makes them ineligible to hold office, and because of that, anybody who holds public office who's an attorney is engaged in a felony and racketeering and espionage. And he filed about 55 complaints over a 5-week period. And the court ruled that he does not have a cognizable claim under federal law, basically that it's frivolous, and that the United States District Court for the District of New Mexico had the right to dismiss his complaint with prejudice as frivolous and in failure to state a claim upon which relief could be granted. And so that case was thrown out. The court reviewed the complaint sua sponte on its own, and under the 28 U.S.C. 1915A screening for prisoner complaints and Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 12b-6, and that's basically their equivalent of a demur, fails to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. Sharp's claims were based on sovereign citizen theories asserting lawyers and judges are British nobility and barred from public office. The court found these theories lacked any conceivable validity in American law, citing precedents such as Charlotte v. Hansen, 433 Fed 660 and 661, and United States v. Palmer, 699 Fed 836, 838. The court deemed the complaint frivolous and threw it out. So now I know a lot of the sovereign people and stuff in here are saying, well, that's because the court's a member of this bar thing and this and that. But so we're going to get into the next video, and then I'll get into some more some more facts for you guys after we watch one of my favorite YouTubers. And I'm sure you guys all know who this guy is. I love this guy. Make sure I've got his video still up
Real
here.
quick, so Ku Klux is a Greek word. It's actually pronounced kiklo,
Oh,
and
interesting.
it means circle.
Yeah, yeah.
So circle of friends, kiklo
Ah,
of friends, a Ku Klux Klan, a circle of friends.
interesting. I didn't know that. I
That's
don't
Greek.
really. So look, I'm in an interracial marriage. I've got mixed kids. I don't care about all this racial crap.
Me neither.
Yeah, we're all Americans at the end of the day. We make fun of. I think it's cool to make fun of each other, make fun of each other's
Absolutely.
cultures and stuff, because that's
If
how
I'm
we
not
can
making
become.
fun of you, you're not my friend.
That's right. Yeah. You know, I used to listen to Flip Wilson and all of his racist crap and never like water off a duck's back. You know, everybody's, look, stereotypes exist for a reason, brother. So I don't have any issues making fun of it and laughing about it. But again, I'm an American at the end of the day, and we all bleed the same color, which is red. And as an American, we bleed red, white, and blue. When I was in the Marine Corps, I had black dudes, I had American Indian dudes, and we were Marines, and we
That's
were
it.
all about America first. So
Mm-hmm.
let's get into Steve Lados Law. This is a longer one. Hopefully you guys have some time. And by the way, John, I know it's late where you're at, so I do appreciate you staying up with us.
All right. Let's do about
and
15, 20 more minutes. Does that work?
Well, this video goes about 19, but we don't have to play the whole thing. The first part is all that really matters.
Okay.
So I'll try to condense it into 15, okay?
Yeah.
All right.
I try not to spend too much time on the tinfoil hat people, but almost every single day, someone will comment someplace on my YouTube channel about how I am an attorney, and therefore I'm a member of the B.A.R. And as a member of the B.A.R., I am, of course, a British citizen, sworn an oath to the Queen, and therefore I'm a traitor, literally a traitor. And people say this, and they say it with a straight face. At least they type it with a straight face. And I've been thinking about this for quite some time as something I should talk about eventually. And I was inspired to talk about it today because I got the message last night. Bob posted it on my channel. Steve Leto, funny how you want the status quo and only know what you are taught by the system. You are a foreign agent, Steve. You had to pass the B.A.R. to become a lawyer. British Accredited Registry. Attorneys use Esquire after the name, a British title. You literally are a traitor. What is the law of the land, Steve? The Constitution of the United States of America. I could go on, but tomorrow's another day. So here's the thing. Every now and then, and like I said, about once a day, someone will comment on one of my various videos and say that, Steve, you're a member of the B.A.R., the B.A.R., and they'll capitalize it, and sometimes they'll put B period, A period, R period. And B.A.R. is a word. It's not three words. It's not an acronym. B.A.R. is simply the Bar Association, and there's a state bar. There is an American Bar Association, but that's not the same kind of thing. That's an association of people who are members of state bars. But I've talked about this on some level before, and the bar is short for, and I'll explain this, but it's actually a reference to a part in a courtroom that does date back to England, but it's got nothing to do with an abbreviation for the British Accredited Registry, or sometimes it's the British Accreditation Registry, and sometimes it's the British Accreditation Register. But the funny thing is the organization doesn't exist, so you can't say which of those names is correct because it's an imaginary organization. So the first thing I'll tell you is if you were to search this concept on the internet, you will find a very, very good article on Snopes. And Snopes has debunked this. And so the headline of their article says,
well, if it's on Snopes and it debunks it, that tells me that it's true, because Snopes is just a bunch of commie pinko scumbags. But in this case,
some lady in an apartment is what Snopes is.
Yeah, they're just a couple of Marxists who hate America, in my opinion. But so just disregard Snopes as being a valid source. But in this case, they're correct. So
does the bar in bar exam, for example, denote a secret lawyer conspiracy? And they titled it a sovereign citizen conspiracy theory. about the licensing of lawyers, and they say that, of course, it's false. It's an urban legend, or it's just a hoax. And they say it's riddled with bad logic and historical inaccuracies. Dan McGill wrote the article that's on Snopes. It was published in 2018. But I've been familiar with this argument now for some time. I was glad to see them when they put this up. And it's just crazy. But I think it's an interesting insight into the kinds of people who are out there. And I know that 99.9% of the people in my audience right now are not wearing tinfoil hats. But there are some people who are very, very angry that I'm doing this right now. And they're furiously typing away going, well, what would you expect a member of the British Accredited Registry to say? He is a British citizen who is a traitor. I'm a U.S. citizen. I've been to England, but I'd never sworn an oath to the Queen. In the United States, lawyers B.A.R does not stand for British Accredited Registry, but there are some who say it does, and is part of a property-grabbing conspiracy. So we're out grabbing property. It's one of the more unusual and complicated theories associated with the sovereign citizen or tax protester movements. And it's the belief that lawyers are members of bar associations, but that is actually they're agents of the British Crown, and they do not have legitimate status in American courts, which is unusual because I've been in American courts for 29 years and never had problems. The theory is partly informed by a false but widely repeated claim that the word bar in this context is an acronym for British Accreditation Registry. And I've also heard it as British Accredited Registry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The elaborate and confusing theory is outlined in an anonymously authored essay called Hiding Behind the Bar, which has been republished and shared in tax protester and sovereign citizen circles for about 10 years.
That's true.
And this is what they say, and this is just hokum, but during the middle 1600s, the Crown of England established a formal registry in London where barristers were ordered by the Crown to be accredited. The establishment of this first international bar association, and that's capital letters, International Bar Association, IBA, allowed barrister lawyers from all nations to be formally recognized and accredited by the only recognized accreditation society.
And that is false, by the way, because the common law is distinct from Roman civil law. Most nations are governed under Roman civil law. They have no individual rights. All the power is vested in the state. Under English common law, as well as American common law, the power is vested in the people. They had a parliament. So that's wrong. But let's keep going.
From this, the acronym B.A.R, B-A-R, all caps, was established denoting the British Accredited Registry, whose members became a powerful and integral force within the IBA. Although this has been denied repeatedly as to its existence, the acronym B.A.R stood for the British Barrister Lawyers who were members of the larger IBA. And yeah, it's denied repeatedly because it's not true. There's no evidence of any of this other than one or two anonymous posts on websites.
Yeah, no citation.
Almost every part of this is factually inaccurate, as Snopes points out. For one thing, the IBA was founded in 1947, not the 1600s. So they're off by about 300, 350 years there. Close enough. Second, of course, there is no evidence of the existence of a professional association for lawyers called the British Accredited Registry, either now or any previous time in history. Look it up.
So that's enough for that. So basically, he's just regurgitating what we've already learned tonight. So look, if I'm a member of this thing, I don't know about it. I guess I must be like a Freemason lawyer, I guess. I guess that's what they're trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah, so really, go ahead, John.
I'm just trying to take it all in, man. Go ahead.
Yeah. So just really quickly. So there is a British Accreditation Registrar called B.A.R, all right? And it is an independent nonprofit institution that accredits conformity assessment bodies. Acronym for that is CABs, C-A-B. Such as organizations that provide testing, calibration, and certification services to assess competence in technical competence, more like engineering, machinery, things like that. By accrediting these bodies, the B.A.R provides assurance with their certificates, test reports, and inspections to foster trust in supporting global recognition standards. Accreditation by the B.A.R. enhances consumer protection, product safety, competitiveness as well by ensuring high standards. And it's supposed to maintain impartiality because it's free from commercial pressures, allegedly, and ensures confidentiality in its processes. So there's just no such thing as a British Accreditation Registry. There are certification bar organizations, membership organizations for each state, where you can become a member and then become admitted into the bar of that particular state after you take the bar exam and pass. And you pass the background check to make sure you're not a scumbag, that you have not been convicted of a crime of dishonesty, because that's something they look at, and that you passed all those tests to make sure that you understand the ethical guidelines of being a lawyer. And then there are also independent bar associations like the American Bar Association, which are more like clubs that people join to say, hey, I'm a member of the bar, the American Bar, and then they'll sometimes lobby Congress because they want to get a law changed, but it has nothing to do with accrediting lawyers. So in closing, the British Accreditation Registry does not govern attorneys in the United States or anywhere else. And the Bar Association is not an acronym for the British Accreditation Registry either. Instead, the bar refers to the physical railing in the courtroom that separates legal professionals from the public modernly. So that bar modernly separates the people that are sitting out there watching Lane Myers get falsely convicted and the people that are inside the well, which is where I stand at my table as the plaintiff or the defendant, depending on who I'm representing. And then the other guy sits at the other table, and then the jury sits over there in the jury panel when they're impaneled. But it has nothing to do with British Accreditation Registry or an acronym for that. And so I'm hoping that you guys learned something tonight.
I have.
John, okay, cool. Do you have any questions, John, for me?
You been watching the Karen Reed case at all? Out of
I have
Massachusetts?
not. Karen Reed, I'll take a look at it.
Oh my God, you got to see that one, buddy.
All right, I'll take a look.
Has
Well,
nothing to do with this.
Yeah, I've been suffering from pretty bad sciatica. I just noticed in the comments that Carolina in Fort Worth just got convicted again. So I don't know if you know who she is.
Oh yeah, she's a friend of mine. She just texted me while we were live.
So that sucks. So guys, everybody say a prayer for Carolina. I know that she's always out there fighting and trying to do what she thinks is right for the American people. And I just wish people would listen to me more about always being civil and respectful, because if you get hot-headed and you talk back to these revenue,
They'll use it against you.
they're going to find a way to arrest you and get you convicted. And the jury's going to see that body cam footage and think you're a crazy person, and it's going to militate against you. If anything, try to act like how BZ Watchdog acted in his last case, where he got the case thrown out by the prosecutor without even having to go to trial.
I've had to change my demeanor too, because if you go from the early John Filax to YouTube, I would just lose my mind and go nuts. And now that I've actually want to maybe pursue these guys in court, like you said, if I go in front of an average Joe Schmo citizen, they're not going to be irate like I am. They're not going to have that fire and the passion in their belly like I do. They're going to say,
they'll think you're crazy.
And I'm not crazy. I just passionate.
But you'll be painted that way by the prosecutor. And you'll be painted that way by the defense attorney when you bring your civil rights claim. And we can see that happening over and over again. Chile de Castro Part 1 was that hostile dude getting arrested, getting thrown in jail. And he's really changed a lot because of what happened to him. He's evolved, and he's become a much better First Amendment advocate. And you have too, and BZ certainly has, and obviously you have. But sometimes the best way to learn is you got to throw yourself in the fire.
Trial and error.
Trial and error. That's right.
So one quick thing before I go, and thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, man, no problem.
One of my subscribers was going to his house to pick something up, or he was at his house and his ex-wife was coming over and she wasn't allowed in. So she calls the police. 2 cops come and they decide they're going to unlawfully enter his house. and they rough him up. So he goes to sue them for conspiracy against rights, and the city said you can't sue for conspiracy because those two cops are not two separate people, but they're part of one entity, the corporation, which is the municipality, and conspiracy requires two or more people. So a lot of people don't understand that the cities are a corporation, that they're a business, so to speak, and they're not. How do I explain that? It's hard to get to wrap your mind around all this stuff. And when you say this to the average person who's never looked into any of it, you might as well be mooing. You might as well be, you know.
Well, just really quickly, John, you could actually, hold on, let me try to get us back up here. You could bring a conspiracy claim against those two cops, but you'd have to allege that they acted outside the course and scope of their duties. It's called frolic and detour, that they were not acting in their official capacity. Is this
I hope
making
he's
sense?
watching. Yeah. But they were, though.
But you have to allege.
They claim that they're, because they have the uniform on, they're working
Doesn't
for
matter.
that municipality. Well, they're claiming it.
Right, but you have to allege and you have to overcome their qualified immunity, which is a rebuttable presumption. And we can get into this in another show.
Okay.
But there is a way to sue them for a conspiracy, and there's a way to sue government employees working for different municipal corporations for a conspiracy. Now, whether or not you're going to succeed and prevail on that is highly unlikely because they do have so much immunity afforded to them for official acts. And then for individual acts, you really have to show that they frolicked and detoured outside the course and scope of their duties. For example, let's say a cop, he's cruising around and then he decides he wants to go see his hooker. Well, he's no longer engaged in his professional capacity. Now, let's say he sees a pimp and they get in a fight and he shoots the pimp. Well, he's not shielded by qualified immunity if he wants to argue he was making a valid arrest. Now he's going to be in a position where he's in his individual capacity when the pimp's family sues him for wrongful death. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
So that's just the best example that I could give you, like off the top of my head. But John, I really liked having you on, man, and I know it's late there. So everybody give me a bunch of ones for John for showing up tonight.
Yes.
And John, do you want to say anything in closing to the audience?
Yes. Join tac-us.org. It's a coalition we started. It's still in its early stages, and we're going to try the best we can to uphold people's constitutional rights in one way or another. You see, I'm a board member. We are a legitimate 501c4 in the state of Florida. We're waiting on an EIN number to be able to take donations, and we have board members, J-Town Press, me, Eyes on the State, the Armed Fishermen, etc., Constitutional Freedom Fighter, etc. And subscribe to my channel, John Filax or Filax, if you're hooked on phonics, like Michael here. I'm just kidding. And that's it, man. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Next time we'll do it on my channel. Maybe we can figure out the logistics to stream on both channels.
Yeah. And then just in closing, I want to say thank you for Sin City Giggles for showing up, for Gloria Ad showing up, Jody Shiloh, thanks for coming, ma'am. And Mountain Mover, my homeboy Mountain Mover, Integrity Now News. I'll take a look at that Integrity Now News. I typically don't want to talk about income tax stuff because it's sort of outside my wheelhouse, but definitely would love to talk about the history of Jekyll Island and all that stuff. Would love that.
That's what got me started as an activist. I was in community college, and instead of doing my schoolwork, I ran across a book called The Federal Mafia by Irwin Schiff, and I couldn't stop reading it. And it basically said that there is no law that says Americans living and working within the United States are required to pay a tax on their labor. And if you go to Title 26, Section 861 T-2 through T-14, it tells you who's required to pay a tax on their labor, and Americans living and working within the United States are not liable, because the people who are liable are like Americans who make an income from outside the United States, foreigners who make an income from within the United States, people in DC because they're not part of the United States, so to speak. So it's based on voluntary compliance, and when you file your 1040s, like I was telling you earlier with that Illinois case, you're doing it voluntarily. So if you don't volunteer, you're not a taxpayer by law, etc., etc. That's a whole nother thing. And if you want to know more information about that, a good start would be The Federal Mafia by Irwin Schiff. And there's a beautiful movie on on YouTube you can watch. It's called America Freedom to Fascism Director's Cut. It was made by Aaron Russo. He was also the guy who created the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. Remember that movie?
Yeah. All right.
And
Well, all right. And then just in closing, Tarnished Viking, thanks for showing up. Mr. P, you have the right to remain silent. Thanks for showing up, brother. Mountain Mover again. Old Texas Tech Man, thank you so much for coming. Aussie Nathan, Mr. Osgood, Mr. DLRU, thanks for joining me tonight. NAH, thank you for joining. Thanks for all the ones. Joe Stanfield, thanks for joining my channel tonight. Make sure to like and subscribe, guys. Make sure to save, all right? Always make sure to save. That's a big one, John. Also, make sure to tell your viewers to save. That's an algorithmic hint that people really like your content. So save for later viewing is a really big algorithmic signal. I also reverse engineer the patents for YouTube and Google, and I know about their algorithms. And I have friends who used to work over at Mountain View. So, and let me see who else. Shock Prof, thanks for joining me, bro. And I think that's pretty much it.
all right,
So guys, make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. Semper Fi, do or die. See you guys
bye
soon. God bless.
everybody. Thank you.